The billionaire's voice thundered across the restaurant as he slammed his palm against the table, rattling the silverware. "You're fired!" Right now, the room fell silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward the young waitress standing before him. Her hands trembled slightly, but her gaze stayed calm, almost sorrowful. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The billionaire's anger filled the air, but the woman didn't flinch. She took a quiet breath and said in a steady voice, "Sir, you'll thank me later." A murmur rippled through the crowd. No one understood why she had dared to speak to him that way, or that her defiance, as reckless as it seemed, might be the very thing that would save his life. Before I tell you what happened next, take a moment to subscribe and share this story with someone who believes that kindness still matters. Because sometimes courage doesn't wear a suit or carry power. Sometimes it wears an apron. And compassion, it often hides in the most unexpected places. Evelyn had worked at the elegant high-end restaurant for nearly a decade. She knew every regular by name, every table by memory, and every preference by heart. Except for one man, the billionaire CEO, Mr. Bennett. He was a mystery even to the staff who had served him for years. Twice a month he arrived alone, said little, and left behind only the faint smell of expensive cologne and unspoken authority. But tonight, something felt different. His posture was slouched, his complexion pale. A thin layer of sweat glistened on his forehead, and his hand trembled slightly as he reached for his glass. Evelyn watched quietly from a distance, concern etching across her face. Her mother had been a nurse, and those symptoms, the fatigue, the shaking, the cold sweat, were all too familiar. Low blood sugar, maybe even the early warning signs of a heart issue. But how could she say something? This was Mr. Bennett, a man whose reputation for temper and pride kept even the manager on edge. Still, as she watched him press a trembling hand against his chest, a quiet voice inside her whispered that staying silent might cost more than her job. Evelyn hurried into the kitchen, her voice barely above a whisper, as she leaned toward the chef. "No salt, low sugar, make it light," she said urgently. The chef hesitated, confused by her tone, but followed her instruction. Moments later, Evelyn returned to the dining area with the modified dish and carefully placed it in front of Mr. Bennett. He glanced down, then frowned. "This isn't what I ordered," he said, his voice carrying that sharp edge of entitlement everyone recognized. Evelyn steadied her breath. "I'm sorry, sir," she replied softly, "but you shouldn't eat heavy food right now." His eyes narrowed in disbelief. "Excuse me?" he snapped. The room grew still, the clinking of glasses fading into silence. Evelyn didn't back down. "You're not well," she said, her tone calm but firm. "I can see it. Please, let me call someone." But before she could finish, his palm struck the table with a thunderous crack. "You think you know better than me? You're just a waitress," he barked. Gasps rippled across the room. Yet even as humiliation burned in her chest, Evelyn didn't waver. She reached forward, gently removed the plate, and looked him in the eye. "Sir," she said quietly, "if I lose my job tonight but save your life, that's a trade I'll make." Mr. Bennett's face turned red with rage as he shouted for the manager. Within moments, the manager hurried over, his expression tight with discomfort. "Evelyn, please," he whispered. "Just step outside." She nodded, swallowing hard as tears welled in her eyes. Her heart pounded, not from fear of losing her job, but from a gut-deep worry that something terrible was about to happen. As the door closed behind her, the tension inside the restaurant lingered like smoke. Then, silence broke into chaos. Mr. Bennett reached for his fork, but his hand froze mid-air. His chest tightened, his breathing quickened, and within seconds he was gasping for air. The color drained from his face. Chairs scraped. Voices shouted. Panic spread across the dining hall. The manager bolted toward the door. "Evelyn!" he yelled, his voice cracking. "Call 911! He's having a heart attack!" Without hesitation, she ran back inside, her instincts overriding everything else. She knelt beside him, her hands steady as she tilted his head back and began CPR, calmly guiding the frightened staff around her. "Stay with me, sir," she whispered between compressions. Minutes later, paramedics rushed in, taking over the rhythm she had started. When Mr. Bennett's eyes fluttered open, the first face he saw was the same woman he had just fired, the one whose courage and compassion had saved his life. Days later, Mr. Bennett opened his eyes to the soft hum of machines and the sterile scent of a hospital room. For a moment, he looked lost, confused, until the memory of that night flooded back. His doctor entered, smiling gently. "You're lucky, Mr. Bennett," he said. "Another few bites of that meal, and your heart might not have made it." The billionaire's gaze drifted toward the window, guilt washing over him. "Who called the ambulance?" he asked quietly. The doctor checked the chart. "A waitress from the restaurant," he replied. "The one you fired." Mr. Bennett fell silent. The weight of those words pressed harder on his chest than the heart attack itself. A week later, he returned to the same restaurant, moving slower this time. Not with pride, but with humility. When Evelyn saw him walk in, she froze, her hands tightening around the tray she was carrying. She expected anger, or maybe another outburst, but instead Mr. Bennett rose from his seat and spoke softly, his voice stripped of arrogance. "I came here to say thank you," he said, his eyes glistening, "for saving a fool like me." He reached into his coat pocket and handed her an envelope. Inside was a scholarship fund in her name, a chance to study nursing, just as her mother once had. "You saw what I couldn't see," he said, his tone sincere. "And that kind of courage deserves more than an apology." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears as the restaurant watched in stunned silence, not at the billionaire's wealth, but at his newfound humanity. Courage isn't measured by titles, wealth, or power. It's defined by those quiet moments when doing the right thing might cost you everything, and you still choose to do it anyway. That night, Evelyn didn't just save a man's life. She saved his humanity. Her compassion reached beyond fear, beyond pride, and reminded everyone watching that true intelligence doesn't come from success. It comes from the heart. In a world that often rewards power over kindness, Evelyn became living proof that compassion is the highest form of strength. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it. Someone out there might need a reminder that kindness isn't weakness. It's strength in its purest form. Because sometimes a simple act of courage can change more than just one life. True moral courage means standing up for what's right, even when it costs you your comfort, your pride, or even your job. Because in the end, courage built on compassion holds far more power than wealth or status ever will.